Right now, former Secretary of State under President Trump, Mike Pompeo, is with us here on Hampshire Today. He was in the Granite State yesterday and joins us right now for the first time on Hampshire Today. Thank you so much for being with us. Good morning.
It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me on this morning.
So let's start off with Joe Biden's speech from yesterday. And obviously, the Trump administration, yourself, played a key role in the withdrawal from Afghanistan. But the execution of that withdrawal sits solely on the shoulders of Joe Biden, in my view. What did you make of yesterday, and what were your biggest takeaways?
It was a set of remarks that were disconnected from what everyone could see with their own eyes. He claimed that this withdrawal was a big success. We all know that's not the case. We know that there was complete chaos. He set a politically driven, arbitrary deadline for the withdrawal of all of our military forces, and then the execution was so poorly done that we resulted in the Taliban quickly overtaking Kabul. We left Bagram Airport too soon and couldn't get our Americans out. We've now left Americans behind in our departure. And, of course, the tragedy that unfolded connected to that, the loss of 13 American lives. This didn't protect America's interests. It will be more difficult for us to fight terrorism from that place now. It didn't have to be this way. It's the right thing to bring our young men and women home. It is, however, not the right thing to do it in a manner that is inconsistent with American values and American history.
If you were still Secretary of State and Donald Trump had won re-election, what would you have done differently?
Well, you don't have to guess. We would have done precisely what we did for the entire 4 years that we were in office. It was important to get these folks home, but always had to have the conditions right. We couldn't do anything that would allow what we just saw unfold over these last 3 weeks happen. And so we didn't. We prevented that. Indeed, for the last 18 months, there wasn't a single senior American attacked by the Taliban. We didn't have a single person killed by the Taliban for 18 months in Afghanistan. All the while, we were drawing down forces. We withdrew from 15,000 to 8,600, and we went down to around 4,500, and then to just over 2,500 each time, measuring, checking the conditions, making sure the military had what it needed, made sure that our diplomats on the ground had what they needed to make sure that the chaos that ensued when President Biden pulled out of Afghanistan in an arbitrary, politically driven date, to make sure that those things didn't happen. That's what we would have continued to do. The Taliban knew that if they attacked an American, there would be real cost to pay. We had proven that to them. This administration saw that when they pushed on them, when the Taliban pushed on the Biden administration, they withdrew. When the Taliban pushed on the Trump administration, we imposed real costs.
President Trump has said that we would not have actually withdrawn and that it was more bluster than actuality. So you're saying that that is not the case, that you would have, in fact, continued the withdrawal?
We would have done what the conditions permitted. That's what the agreement we signed with Taliban drove, right? It said, here are the things we have an expectation you will do, and here's our objective, what thing we want to go accomplish. But until the conditions are right, we're not going to do that. President Trump wanted every American out of Afghanistan from the moment he took office, and we began to work on it. But we also knew that you couldn't do this until the conditions were right on the ground. They weren't right on the ground on January 20th, 2021, so we weren't able to get those final handful of folks out. But even with that limited number of troops still on the ground, we were able to secure the same American interests we had secured for the entire 4 years. You don't have to guess what would have happened. We know how we handled this for 4 years. It was successful. It was a policy that got most of our people home. We were continuing to work on that project, and until the conditions were right, we were going to make sure that every day we did what President Trump had set out and told the American people we would do.
One of the major things that has been called into question is our direct negotiations during the Trump administration with the Taliban, including the release of 5,000 combat and political Taliban prisoners. John Bolton was on Hampshire Today earlier this week, and he mentioned that. There's also obviously the picture that we've seen online of you with the Taliban co-founder. Do you have any regrets in negotiating directly with the Taliban, and particularly given that one would assume that those individuals being released from prison led to how quickly they were able to assume control of the country.
Yeah, that's just false. That's the story of the left. It's the story of John Bolton, who hated President Trump, still hates him. You can go read his book. John Bolton is a forever war guy. He'd love to have 150,000 American soldiers still on the ground there. I don't have to guess. This is what he told the president. He wanted to be there with a big presence forever. Deeply inconsistent with what President Trump had told the American people he would do, and what, frankly, I think most Americans wanted our young men and women home. They were being killed there for a mission that was no longer likely to be successful in the way that Mr. Bolton had talked about for, goodness, 20 years now, protecting America. So we worked with every group in Afghanistan. I met with leaders in the north, called the Northern Alliance. I met with leaders in the west, in Herat. I met with women's groups and NGOs. I met with the Taliban. You talked about that. I certainly met with the Afghan government a great deal as well. We were working with every Afghan to try to deliver peace and reconciliation in the country. We had the Afghans talking for the first time in 20 years amongst each other to try and deliver that. President Biden talked about those 5,000 prisoners. Remember, it is President Biden who, if he was responsible, a few years back, Osama bin Laden would still be alive. Qasem Soleimani would still be alive. He waves these shiny objects. He blames the Trump administration and says, we picked a date certain. We didn't pick a date certain. He talks about these 5,000 prisoners. The connection to what happened in the fall of Kabul is pure conjecture. The Afghan government had these prisoners. They weren't American prisoners. We weren't holding a single prisoner inside of Afghanistan. We did the right thing. You always work to make peace with your enemies, with your adversaries. We know the Taliban. They're butchers. They're horrible people. But we sat down with them to see if we couldn't build out a model that would reduce risk to women and children and all the great people of Afghanistan. We didn't get there. It was going to be a long set of conversations among the Afghan people. They've been fighting for an awfully long time. We knew that discussion would take a long time, but it was a worthy effort. And all the while we were doing that, all the while we were in conversations with the Pashtuns, the Tajiks, with every group inside of Afghanistan, we were protecting American interests. We were protecting American soldiers. We were protecting every American on the ground. President Trump was clear. We will not withdraw until we have every American out, until we get every bit of our high-end equipment out, and until we can secure America's interests in the region. We didn't get the conditions during our time, and so we didn't do what President Biden did. Sadly, he picked this politically arbitrary date and drove what we've seen these last 3 weeks.
Yeah, Joe Biden, according to the late John McCain, who I got to know very well during his time in New Hampshire, had been wrong on just about every foreign policy issue through the course of his long political career, and certainly Osama bin Laden is one of those, and the way he has handled the withdrawal from Afghanistan indicates a number of poor decisions and misstatements. But back just to one moment on the picture that we have seen with you and the Taliban co-founder Abdul Ghani Baradar. Is that a mistake in your view? Because that's something from a political standpoint that I assume that if you do run for president, opponents will jump upon. And I understand how circumstances lead to those types of pictures. But is that something that you at all look back and cringe and think maybe I should have done this differently?
Oh, no, goodness, no. I met with Chairman Kim in North Korea on multiple occasions. He's a horrible butcher. He's killed hundreds of thousands of people. I met with Vladimir Putin. He continues to murder people all across the world. He closed down a pipeline in the United States of America under the Biden administration. He took 1/5 of Ukraine in the Obama administration. He's a bad actor. I met with Chairman Kim in China, the one person who has the designs and intention of destroying our way of life in the United States of America. No, your duty, your obligation as a Secretary of State is to meet with your adversaries and deliver them an American first foreign policy that achieves the outcomes that the American people elected President Trump, who appointed me, who elected him to do precisely that, deliver security for the American people. No, it's not a mistake to do that. The mistake is the risk of that when you're with them, you don't say the things that protect America. We did that. When I was with Mullah Baradar, we made clear that we would rain holy hell on him if he harmed a single American. He didn't do it. He feared President Trump and me. He knew we were serious about protecting America. We did that. I met with a lot of bad actors all across the world, not only when I was a Secretary of State, but when I was the CIA director as well. These are the things that American leaders do to protect Americans.
I appreciate that, and I think that's something that I think was important for for you to address, and some of the listeners I know wanted to hear directly from you. It's Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State under President Trump, joining us here on New Hampshire Today. One of the aspects of President Trump that I think was significant in his foreign policy dealings was that peace through strength type of a mantra, and something that's been frustrating to me, and not just me, but Democratic Congressman Chris Pappas mentioned this as well, that we seem to have an acquiescence to the Taliban in how we have dealt with them in this particular circumstance. What do you think that acquiescence means moving forward, A? And B, the fact that they were able to take Afghanistan so quickly, 11 days, when something that's been very hurtful to many who served in Afghanistan. What do you say to those soldiers, those individuals who left folks behind there, who were friends, they developed relationships with, about what the future is going to look like in Afghanistan?
So, Chris, this is an important conversation. I want to say to every individual, every service member, every soldier, every sailor, every airman, every Marine who worked and served in Afghanistan, that your work was noble. It was important. I saw this firsthand as CIA director. You saved lives. You saved American lives with the amazing work you did over these last 2 decades. So don't regret 1 second of it. Know that America loves you, appreciates you, and values the work that you did in Afghanistan. As for the Taliban today and what this administration has done with respect to the Taliban, we have to recognize precisely who they are. They haven't changed their stripes. We demanded that they change. They made a commitment to break with Al-Qaeda, but they didn't actually deliver on that. And because they didn't deliver on that, the conditions weren't right to do what you've seen the Biden administration do. And so as we watch this administration, I pray that they don't recognize the Taliban as the rightful leaders in Afghanistan. I pray that we're not going to pay them a whole bunch of money to allow the remaining Americans get out. It looks like that's what's being set up. We would have never done that. We made clear to the Taliban we were going to impose cost, not provide them resources. This is the same kind of folks who paid billions of dollars to the Iranians. Mm-hmm. They may well head down the same path with the Taliban. That would be an enormous mistake.
Final thing on your trip to New Hampshire, you were here yesterday, a number of events, one focused on education. You met with the New Hampshire GOP as well. How would you categorize your trip here? And there's been a lot of discussion as to whether or not you are going to pursue the presidency. Is that something that's in the future?
Trip there yesterday was for a couple things. One was to meet some great people of New Hampshire. The second was there's an important special election this coming Tuesday, so less than a week from now. Linda Camerata is running for the as state representative. I want everyone to get out and support her and vote for her. It's really important to help New Hampshire be a better place to have Linda Camerata elected. And then finally, you mentioned the original reason for the trip was to go to New Hampshire and thank the people of New Hampshire for electing people who created a piece of legislation that's now going to let students all across New Hampshire and parents all across New Hampshire educate their children in the way that they want to. We've seen what's happening in our schools. Education freedom, school freedom matters. You all now have the ability to tell union bosses, no, we're going to send our kids to places that actually work and deliver for our kids. I think that's fantastic. And so we wanted to talk about educated freedom and the fact that we want parents in control. We've seen the junk that's being brought into our schools. We've seen schools walk away from teaching the skills that young people need to be successful in today's times. You all are working your way towards making sure that parents are back in control. And I wanted to say thanks for that and encourage every person in New Hampshire to take charge of their own children's education.
Just on the presidency for 1 second, is that something that you're entertaining, A? And B, Donald Trump has said that he is interested in running for president again. In fact, he's going to be in Iowa in the coming weeks. Would a Trump run for president preclude you from running, and is it something that you're giving any consideration to?
I'm working tirelessly. I created an organization called CAVPAC. Go see it at cavpac.com. We're working to crush the liberals in 2022. It's how I spend most of my time. That's my focus. What happens after that is hard to know, other than the fact that I promise I'm going to continue to stay in the fight to promote conservative values and to work to deliver and reclaim America. That's the fight I'm in. What happens in 2024, I don't think anybody can predict just yet. I know what my focus and what everyone's focus needs to be to make sure that come January of 2023, when the new Congress is installed and there's new county commissioners and school board members and state representatives like Linda Camerata, to make sure that they are the ones who have the capacity to deliver good outcomes for the people of New Hampshire and people all across America.
Secretary Pompeo, thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Have a good morning.
You as well. Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State under President Trump, joining us here on Hampshire today. He was in the Granite State yesterday. Some thoughts on that up next. I am Chris Ryan. This is New Hampshire Today.